Presentation is a product of the Practical Farmers of Iowa. It's a tarping study to determine how clear or opaque tarps kill weeds. I'm dedicating this to my old cytogenetics professor, Franklin Eldridge, who really taught me how to be careful in record keeping. The overarching goal of tarping is to reduce the use of herbicides in controlling annual weeds and grasses. My thesis is that using clear tarp, which is called solarization, works better than black tarp because it raises the temperature better. Clear tarp creates a greenhouse effect, whereas black tarp holds the heat on the tarp and doesn't necessarily let it hit the ground below. It has many applications, especially in light of people who like to go green or minimize the use of chemicals. And I believe that you find landscape architects and a variety of people who do not want to use chemicals, and using a tarp to kill weeds and grasses and prepare for some other type of seedbed would be much cleaner than using all types of chemicals that are used today. Here you'll find some basic background information. The one point I want to make is that the latitude is right on the South Dakota-Nebraska line in northeast Nebraska, and I could not find another study that had done in that area. You can read on the documentation how things were prepared in this slide. This slide depicts soil temperatures in that latitude. On May 15th, you're at about 60 degrees. There are a lot of weed and grass seeds which won't germinate at that temperature or just aren't ready. May 15th is an ideal planting time. If you wait till June 1, you're at 68 degrees. So essentially what you're trying to do is move that planting time up, move the soil temperature up so you germinate those seeds and then kill them with the greenhouse effect. And these soil temperatures are at 10 centimeters based upon Syngenta data. I started this test on April 13th for no other reason other than I had the time to do it. It was a nice hot day. It recently had some moisture, so it was a good time to start the solarization experiment. Use sandbags to hold down the plastic tarps, set up a little production line out of a gravel pit that I own, and fill the bags about half full. You want really long bags if you can. Better option than bags would be pipe, but you would have to have level ground and preferably cut a little trench that pipe would hold in. The better the seal, the better the result is what I'm finding. This is a panoramic view of the plot location. This was brome grass, and the sod was killed in November of the year prior to try to clear it. Everything was dead at the time I started on April 13. It was a nice clean palette. Closer view of plots B and C before starting the experiment with tarps. A close-up of plots A and D before tarping. Here you have plot A with the tarp installed. I did use steel fence posts for part of it to try to get a better seal. And then you show the control plot where nothing was covered. Plot B, both tarp and control on the day it first started. Again, plot C on the first day. And finally, plot D on the first day, April 13, 2024. This is not part of the test, but I did have some tarp down in the fall of 2023 to see what would happen when you leave the tarp for the whole winter and spring. And I cut some holes in it, planted, and nothing wanted to grow out of that tarp. It just seemed that leaving the tarp on too long was detrimental to growth. I used hula hoops and tossed out 3 different areas in each plot, each of the 8 plots. And here you can see plot A, the control where there was no tarp. Here we have plot A where the clear tarp was applied, marked difference from where there was no tarp in the control plot. You can see a few weeds are starting, but it is almost a clean palette. Plot B where there was no tarp. B with the tarp attached 47 days after tarping. Plot C with no tarp. Again, plot C where it was tarped with the clear or opaque tarp. Plot D where there was no TARP. This was a particularly weedy area. Plot D is a perfect example of why you do multiple tests, multiple plots. D had several problems. Some grass and weeds grew up, blocking the morning sun. There was a depression where I did not get a good tight seal, and it was a real weedy area. So what you have in the first slide on the left shows a lot of grass growing, and I attribute that 100% to a depression that was there where I didn't get a good seal, and because of the shade you can see to the right of that slide. If you go to the second and third, you can see it's pretty darn good weed coverage. There are some small weeds in the third slide, but overall you're going to have some errors in your tests, and nothing can be perfect. I would discount slide number 1 and go with 2 and 3 to determine efficacy of using these opaque TARPs. This slide shows the results of weed coverage in each of the plots. So the plot that is tarped and the plot that was a control with no tarp. And you can see right down the line, except for plot D, you had practically no weed coverage where there was a tarp for 47 days. An excellent result using the opaque or clear tarp and the solarization. Next series of slides shows these same plots some 19 days after tarp removal. Here you have plot A, the control, showing what happened to the weeds where there was no tarp for a period of 66 days from the time that it started. Here we are at tarp A, showing the plots that were actually covered by the tarp. Now you're going to see some green in there. That is actually corn. I put an open pollinated corn in there, 1 seed per foot, and I think I did 3 or 4 rows in each of these plots. So some of the green you're seeing is not an actual weed. But what is surprising is how clean these are some 19 days after tarp removal. The solarization did a very good job of cleaning this up to allow for minimal weeding. And that's why I think that clear tarps have great application in small gardens, in horticulture, in test plots, in starting lawns. Plot B, where there was a tarp, showing the current result. Again, you can see the corn growing here and there. Plot B, after tarp removal. This is the control plot that had no tarp, and no great surprise, the weeds get bigger. That's all it really shows. There's nothing to be learned other than weeds continue to grow and spread. This is plot C, 19 days after removal. Note some of the plants are actually corn that has sprouted. It remained very clean. It seems that the clear tarp is good at germinating seeds early. This is plot C, the control plot. Oh, the area that was clean has stayed fairly clean. That's the middle slide, but the rest of it, the weeds have bloomed, and they're just got huge and covered. It's 100% coverage almost at 19 days after. Comparing that to the test plot with you have a tarp coverage, it's night and day difference. Here we are in plot D, where the tarp was applied. You can see that it's fairly good, but except for the third slide, which is right up against that area where there was shade and a depression. I did a little bit different plots each time when I used the hula hoop to make sure that I was random in my placement. And you can also see the corn is starting to grow in there. This is plot D, the control, where there was no tarp, and of course the weeds continue to expand. There's no doubt that using clear tarp is extremely effective in killing weeds and preparing plots for planting. The number of weeds that remained were so easy to clean up that if you have a big garden plot, it just makes life a lot easier. But this is a test that went to June and not May 15th. I would much rather pull these tarps off on May 15th and start a few days earlier to see if I can get that earlier planting. But that's left to another test. This was a cool, wet spring, and it made a big difference in this situation. I don't use black tarps ever again based upon my past experience. I always thought black would do a lot better than the opaque tarps, but I think that the greenhouse effect and solarization, as long as you can keep them sealed to the ground, it is far better than using black tarps. This test resulted in 60% weed coverage where there was no TARP and 4% weed coverage where there was a TARP. And my conclusion is that if there wasn't that air leakage and shade in plot D, there would probably be just about 0% coverage where there was a TARP. So this was a clear success to prove that the clear TARPs do work for preparing seed beds on the latitude of the Nebraska-South Dakota border. Suggestions in tarping and for potential future study is to make sure you get a good seal, and you can dig your trenches, you can use pipes, whatever it is, but you must have a good seal on this. Also, water. You need to keep this wet. I think it'd be a good test to pull the tarp up every 2 weeks or every week and give it an inch of water and put it down compared to one that didn't have the extra water, because I do believe that these were far more effective if it's wet. 10 mil plastic, I think, is going to last longer. Clear plastic should last longer than black. It's just my thought. It'd be good to do some tests on that. Avoiding shade and deep depressions, you really need a level seed bed. My conclusions are simple and straightforward. Shade and air infiltration, depressions where you don't get a tight seal will skew results, and plot D proves that. Clear tarping is very effective in killing weeds, and I will not use black tarps again unless they're free. It seems to me that in my experience that the clear tarping will have a longer weed kill, that it'll be longer in time before weeds start growing within the plot as compared to a black, but I haven't done that test yet. I think there's other follow-ups. This would be a great test to have 20 by 100 foot plots having clear tarp, black tarp, no TARP. But by the time you get that done and you have 4 different groups of this, you're going to have $1,200, $800 to $1,200 into TARPs alone. So would be a very expensive test. Overall, you have a number of factors. Date you put in these TARPs, and most people will put them in the same because of their growing season. The amount of time you put them on, again, that's not really a variable because you have a set growing season and you know when you need to get your plants in the ground. And temperature, there's the big variable, because a cool, wet spring like I had this year in Nebraska is going to skew the results. I might be able to put those on and pull my tarps off on May 15th and have a good seed bed and just as good a result if I'd had a hot spring like I've had in the last couple of years. But moisture, I think that's the variable that we could test and make differences on. I think that adding moisture would probably improve the efficacy of these tarps, but I don't know. I think there's a test that needs to be done.